Hello fellow DJs, today I'm going to be reviewing these new amplifiers I've got here, the Crown XLS Drivecore 2000. As many of you are well aware, this amplifier has a built-in crossover which is basically either a high-pass filter or a low-pass filter depending on how you set it up. So I'm going to talk you through a few of the menus on here just so that you get a feel of the thing. I've got on the front here our power switch, so we're going to start the thing up and I'll scroll down so you can see the screen there. I might have to turn the light off so you can see it better. You can see that there. So at the moment, the amplifier is running in the stereo high pass mode, so it's basically running in two channels, and we've got a high pass filter on it. If I hold down the menu button here, it's now entered the amp mode menu, so we can scroll through here. We can adjust the clip settings, but we're not going to do that, so we're going to go into the amp mode. And now in here we can select stereo, the input, the bridge, and back to stereo again. So basically it depends whether you want it in stereo, the mono, or bridge. So at the moment, let's leave it in stereo, and we can apply a filter to it. We can go a high pass filter, so it lets frequencies pass above a certain frequency. We can go low pass, which lets frequencies below a set frequency pass through it for subwoofers, and we can go bypass, and bypass basically means that it won't touch the input signal. What goes into the amplifier comes out of the amplifier and goes straight to the speakers. Or we can go crossover, where it sends, if you tell it a certain frequency, it will send the frequencies below it to one channel and above it to another channel. But it gives you, and if we go into the next menu here, it gives you the frequency points that we can set it and run through. So it's handy enough to have on an amplifier. I mean, it's good for my setup because it means I can feed the mixer straight into these amplifiers and loop between them without the need to ever have a crossover on my rig. So it's good for things like that. But if you just want to leave it as it is, you can just set it up to bypass mode, and you can use an external crossover on it and leave it at that. We've also got the rotary volume controls here and here, so that brings it up for the menus. The one disadvantage with the menus on here is that if I go back into the menu again, and imagine the music's playing now, and I want to adjust, say, the frequency for the high pass filter, if I say adjust it up a bit, the change here to 198 Hz won't come into effect. See, I can't hear this on the speakers until you go enter and it exits, and now it'll apply the change. So you can't flick through it and hear it in situ. You've got to exit the menu before the change is applied to the processors inside the amplifier. But apart from that, those are the main features in the menu here. We can also apply the high pass and low pass filter to any of the modes. So if I'm running in mono mode, in bridge, so I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go to bridge mode for the subwoofers. I'll put a low pass filter on that, and we'll crank the frequency down to something sensible for a subwoofer, which will be somewhere around the 120, 115 mark. So we can leave it at that. So we can have the filters on any of the particular modes, which is good. So I can use this as a single channel amplifier for a subwoofer with a crossover built in. Good planning. I'll zoom out a bit. Switch my light back on. You'll also notice that this amplifier is very quiet, and that's because even though the amplifier is running at the moment, the fan is absolutely stationary. The fan doesn't kick in until it needs to, and I think this amplifier is a dual speed fan. I'm not sure. There's only two wires going to the motor at the back. You can see through the grill, but it might be a dual speed fan. But the fan won't kick in until it's needed. Now, I'm going to compare this amplifier. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the cover off it so you can see what's inside it, because as a lot of you may already know, that these amplifiers, the actual workings inside them are completely different to a traditional linear amplifier. So I'm going to compare this to a Numark Dimension 4 amplifier. I'll take the covers off both of them, have both of them sat side by side, just so you can get a feel as to what's inside. A little bit of freehand with the camera here for a start. But here we have the Crown XLS 2000 without the cover on. Now, if you know anything about amplifiers and you take the cover off them, that's the sort of thing that you're usually going to expect when you take the cover off an amplifier. Many of you out there who've seen the inside of amplifiers before are probably looking at this thinking, where the hell is everything? And that was my opinion when I first opened it up. And looking inside this new amplifier, there's not a lot of components that many people would recognise. in the old amplifier, this traditional type of amplifier, we've got this massive great toroidal transformer here, and well, where is it in the new amplifier? It's been replaced by this section here, and this section here is the modern switch mode power supply. This is like the sort of thing that you have in your laptop power supply units that make that very high frequency sort of noise you may be able to hear when the things are a few years old. This is the switch mode power supply basically, and this thing saves a heck of a lot of weight. It's also very efficient. This thing can step the voltage down to this thing can step a lot of the voltage down without wasting so much as heat, whereas this type of wound transform, the copper wound transformers, these things waste quite a bit of heat. They also weigh quite a bit, and this thing weighs an absolute ton with its core and then the copper involved in it. This thing weighs very little. There's nothing to it. Also, we noticed in the older amplifier, we've got these whole row of transistors here that actually do the amplifying. We've got a massive, great aluminium heatsink down here with more transistors underneath. The same on this side of the amplifier, massive, great aluminium heatsinks, loads of transistors. Well, where is everything gone here? We've got a few little heat sinks here, and a few little transistors in here, and a few capacitors here, and another thing here, a few inductor coils here, but where is everything? There's hardly anything in it. And yet, this amplifier has got 200 watts more power output than this amplifier, this Numark Dimension 4 amplifier, which is a fantastic amplifier in its own right. I've had this amplifier for 5 years now. This thing thumped away all night, never thrown in the towel. This thing is one of the best bits of disco equipment I've ever owned. But you look at it and you think, well, where is everything? But no, this Numark amplifier, I think, is 1,900 watts and driving a 4 ohm load in bridge. This one in mono bridge as well, driving the same 4 ohm load, can kick out 2,100 watts. I don't know why Crown made it 2,100 watts and still called it the Crown XLS 2000. I don't know what they're playing at there, but that's for them to sort out. But yeah, I'm looking at that, and there's not a lot inside. I just hope to hell it doesn't go wrong, because there's not going to be much you can test on it. Because at least on this amplifier you can test the various components if something should fail. But the main advantage between the two types of amplifier is that this one is very light. I can pick this thing up while still holding the camera with one hand. This thing weighs about 5 kilos, there's very little weight in it at all. Whereas the Numark, God, I'm not even going to attempt to try and pick this up, this thing weighs about 3 tons! I think this weighs upwards of 20 kilos, this amplifier. I think this weighs about 16, 17 kilograms, I'm not sure, I haven't weighed it yet, but yeah, the advantage is clear. The Crown amplifier, very powerful, very lightweight, but I cannot comment on reliability on this thing yet. I have used this amplifier once, only driving a stereo load at 8 ohms, both on each channel, in stereo. I was driving it with I think I had a high pass filter on it. That was also running off a portable generator, so I've only used it once like that, so I can't really comment on reliability. But in terms of the sound quality on both of them, a lot of people turn around and say, "Oh, you switch mode amplifiers, no switch mode, no technology, no, gotta have traditional linear amplifiers." I personally cannot tell the sound difference between something like this pounding away at a disco and something like this pounding away at the same party. There is, the audience will not tell the difference. I personally can't tell the difference. Some people probably argue they can, but this thing sounds as clear as a bell, as does this. So the choice is yours, people, but certainly, at the end of the day, my opinion is, if you've got the money to spend, get this, because it will make your life so much easier in the future. So I'm just going to spin the thing around, and we can have a look at some of the connections on the back. I'll also spin the Numark round for a comparison. You can immediately tell here I'm struggling to turn this thing round because the weight is so much heavier. And also, if I line the two of them up, we can see the size difference between them. Look how much deeper the Numark is compared to the Crown. Now, a few of the features along the back here, I'll stand the thing up so the light's a bit better, if it will stand up. We've got XLR XLR connections for both channels. We've also got phono connections per channels. We've also got a 1/4" jack connection for the both channels. So there's a fairly wide variety of inputs and outputs. It says link output here, but you could feed in with the phono and use the XLR as an output, despite it saying in there. The signals from here are all connected basically across the back of the circuit board, so you could feed in and out on any one of these, any number of these channels. As I said, here we've got the cooling fan. Now the interesting point with this is this thing draws its air in from the front and exhausts it at the rear here, so it pulls the air from the front, it's front to rear, whereas the Numark over here, this draws from the rear and puts it out the front. It's worth considering if you're running with other amplifiers as well. We've got the binding post outputs, we've also got the speak-on outputs. The thing that I don't like about this is that you've got your output for channel 2 here, your output for channel 1 here. If you intend to use it in bridge mode, you have to reconfigure your speak-on cables to use the second pins. So I don't know if you can make that out on the camera, but if we're using bridge, we have to connect to +1 and +2 on here. You have to change the wiring in your speak-on plug, which is different to the Numark amplifier, which I have down here. Because this Numark amplifier has a bridge output that we can simply use on here. So that's a bit of a disadvantage that I don't like about the Crown, is that it doesn't have a dedicated bridge output. You have to start adjusting your speaker cables to suit it. The other good thing with the Numark compared to the Crown is it has a through connection for the XLR. This thing doesn't have phono connections. It's got your 1/4" per channels, and in and out for your XLR as well, with a few of the various controls on the back. All your subwoofer controls are on the back of this one rather than being on the front. But back to the Crown here, which is my original intention. Would I recommend the Crown? Yes. Oh yes, I'd certainly recommend it. Fantastic amplifier. It's not cheap. These things aren't cheap at all. They're not cheap in the slightest. But in terms of reliability, I've run this thing once, as I said before, on generator, driving 8 ohm speakers. Didn't put a foot wrong. Perfect, clear sound, deep bass, you know, as much as you can ask for out of an amplifier really. So all in all, we give it the thumbs up.